My name is David Bain, as she said. I'm the Executive Director for NAMI Sacramento. So we're the local affiliate for the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and we help people who are living with mental illness and the family members of people living with mental illness. Speaking for myself, I have one brain, but two brain disorders. One is depression, and the other one is epilepsy. I share that not looking for sympathy, but I'm trying to help you guys identify what position I'm coming from. And I talk about depression and epilepsy hand in hand because they're both brain disorders, but somehow or another in our society, depression is stigmatized, but epilepsy is a medical condition that's okay to talk about. And the reality is that they're very similar. Schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, depression, all impacts the same part of the brain. There is no cure, there's only lifelong treatment, and so it's a matter of finding a treatment plan that works for you. So there is really no difference other than the final symptoms that come up between the two disorders. So for NAMI, a brief history of our organization. Back in the 1970s, states were emptying out psychiatric hospitals throughout the U.S., and they were sending patients home with a bottle of pills and no instructions. So family members were struggling because they didn't know what to do, and they were trying their best to support their loved ones. So they had these informal pockets of support groups started forming throughout the U.S. We here in Sacramento at that time were the Sacramento Alliance for the Mentally Ill. And then in 1983, somebody had the wherewithal to go about the U.S. and grab all these different groups and form them into NAMI. So that was when the organization was officially born, was in 1983, and it was a family support group at that time. They started creating programs after that. We have Family to Family is a structured 12-week-long class, and then our family support groups has a structured format for that as well. Everything we do is based on lived experience, so it's family members who are teaching and supporting family members. So you have people who know when you go to a group or to a class, they've been through some of the same trials that you have been through in supporting and loving your family member. And those programs were working very well, and so we did the same thing for people living with a mental health issue. So we have peer-to-peer is the class, and then connection support group is the support groups that we do. And again, with the lived experience, it's people who are living successfully with their mental health issue are been trained to teach and to lead these groups. So like I said, everything we do is about lived experience. A few years back, we started doing presentations for the communities. In Our Own Voice is a primary one, and it's two people who are now living successfully with their brain disorder, and they come before the group and they say, here's all the bad things that happened to me, jail, homelessness, addiction, what have you. This is what I did to get acceptance of my mental health problem, and then this is me nowadays living successfully with my disorder. And it's very good. It gives people hope, not only for the individuals, but for family members, and then for people who aren't directly impacted by mental illness. It's very good at breaking through some of the stigmas and inform people about the realities of what mental illness is like. And so it's really good at opening people's minds up to what this issue is. We're talking about a disorder that impacts the brain. The brain is an organ like any other part of the body, so calling it a mental illness is almost not even valid anymore. It's a physical part of your body that has this disorder. And nobody chooses it. It seems to choose you. There's some genetic research being done that shows that it can be passed down hereditary. You can see it sometimes in family lineages. And then sometimes people will be more predisposed to a mental health problem than others. So again, it depends upon what your genes are saying at that point in time. There are other forms of mental illness that come about based on trauma, and Alton will talk about that a little bit more in a little bit. And so they're still doing a lot of research and getting closer to finding the exact genes that will cause this sort of thing. Hopefully something will come out, some sort of a gene therapy, and maybe we can get more of a cure out of that instead of just lifelong treatment, which is what we're looking at right now. So I have up here, you guys can come up afterwards and grab some of this documentation we have. I've got a sheet that talks about our programs and services that we offer to the community. I I have a sheet up here of support groups, and some of these are NAMI support groups. On the back side or some other support groups here in the Sacramento area. And then I have a sheet about 5 ways that you can help a veteran. And it gets into some of the specific things that you can do if you know of someone who's a veteran who's struggling with their disorder. And then I have also up here, this is our NAMI Sacramento informational brochure. It gives a little bit of an overview of our organization as a whole. There is a membership form inside here. We are a member-based organization. People don't have to be a member to take advantage of our services. Membership just helps make our organization stronger and keeps people in the communication loop for what's going on. We're talking about new programs or advocacy. We do a lot of advocacy, political advocacy. So sometimes you'll get emails saying, such and such a bill is up for debate currently in the Senate. Write your senator in support of that. But we don't charge for any of our classes or support groups. We don't want finances to ever be in the way of anybody getting help with their condition. So we are primarily donation funded. The membership fees that we take in are split between us, NAMI California, and NAMI National. So this doesn't really support our organization, but they do help pay a little bit for postage. And we are 3-tiered. So we have NAMI National as a nationwide organization. They work on federal legislation and the programs. And then NAMI California, they support the local affiliates in our endeavors, and then the local affiliates are the ones who are actually out there providing the services to the community. And so each county has a different NAMI affiliate that will provide services. And for those of you who are not in the Sacramento area, if you go to www.nami.org, N-A-M-I, there's a button there that you can click on it, find your local NAMI. And so you put in your zip code, and it'll pop up the closest NAMI offices to where you live. And you can contact them for getting direct services that you might need. Each affiliate's a little bit different in their capacity, but we all pretty much have the same programs. And the same signature programs of support and education and information as we go about the community and try to educate and inform people the best we can about the realities of mental illness. We're starting to get more into, we've been dealing historically more with psychiatric disorders. We're seeing more of a case of anxiety and depression and post-traumatic stress disorder. And so we're providing more and more services along that line because that seems to be ever increasing, especially with our youth. So we're trying to get into providing services for youth, and you'll see more programs because there's more and more information out there and evidence showing that the incidence for anxiety and depression is increasing in our youth. And so prevention and early intervention is really important. A National Institute for Mental Health did a 5-year study, and they've shown that the earlier that you get somebody in for treatment, the less catastrophic their symptoms will be over their lifetime. Typically what historically has happened is that people start exhibiting symptoms and nobody addresses it, and then the person ends up running away, they end up going to jail, they're homeless, and then they start heading down the roads for substance abuse and addiction and repeated jail time, and then trying to retrieve them at that point becomes very difficult to do. So the earlier we can get somebody in and get them for treatment, the less severe their symptoms will be and the less of a problem it will be for them down the road. So there's a lot of programs out there now for prevention and early intervention. There's more recognition nowadays for trauma as what it does for a lifelong condition, what it does if you got a kid facing adverse childhood experiences for over a long period of time, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse, that will manifest by the time they get into their teens and early 20s into personality disorders and behavioral issues that they don't know who to trust, who to talk to, they don't know how to communicate, and that needs to be repaired. Well, we're trying to also help alleviate that by healing the adults who are having those children and getting them to not create those adverse childhood experiences and to improve our society as a whole so those children aren't growing up wondering where they're going to be eating, wondering what kind of violence they're going to be experiencing that day, and have them in a safer environment as a whole society-wide so they grow up to be more capable adults. Alton Todd here with me. He's got years of experience with NAMI. He's been with the VA. He's one of our support group facilitators. He teaches our peer-to-peer class, and he is our post-traumatic stress disorder expert. So I'll turn it over to him now.
No pressure, no pressure. How's everybody doing? So my name's Alton Todd, and a quick disclaimer, I'm not here in an official VA capacity. I'm here more or less of a veteran, mainly because our public affairs office, kind of always talks about, because I actually work for the VA now.
It's purely coincidental.
It's a part of my story, of course. So anyway, I first got involved with NAMI many years ago while receiving services as a veteran in Arizona, and one of the reasons that I gravitated towards NAMI was because I wanted to find out, I wanted to be more informed about what was available in the community. Up to that point, I was mainly dealing with just the VA, particularly in programs and different types of therapies and treatments. And I wanted to get out into the community because I knew that there was more out there, that I wanted to live in the community. I didn't want to live at the VA hospital. I wanted to live in the community. So NAMI was a great platform for me to get involved with what's going on in the community. And it actually made things so much better and easier for me because I understood the correlation. I came from a background of Southern California. I lived, born and raised in Los Angeles. And I grew up in the late 60s, post-Vietnam, and, a lot of things weren't talked about in my community, one of them, and in my family, in my environment. Mental illness was one of them. I mean, it was just kind of taboo. We didn't talk about if you were feeling sick, behavior-wise. We talked about illnesses, in our community, like, the physical ailments, diabetes and heart disease and those types of things, but nobody ever talked about, any type of mental dysfunction. And so I kind of grew up, with that attitude that, those are things that I didn't talk about, even if I didn't feel right, I wouldn't talk about it. And so fast forward, I joined the military at an early age, 17, and I was halfway across the world, by the time I was 18. I was in Germany, did 2 tours in Germany, and served in the Army for 8 years. And, I just I got through it. I did the soldier thing. And then when I got out, I had a couple of experiences, traumatic experiences in the military. And like I said, carrying that behavior from childhood where, you just didn't talk about feeling a certain way. I never shared. I never said that there was anything wrong or there was a possibility of anything being wrong. And so I got out the military, had a young family, and just kind of jumped back into living, raising kids and dealing with life. And something felt different, but I didn't discuss it. I didn't share about it. I didn't want, people to know that there was that stigma that David talks about of being mentally, ill or being sick or anything like that. It was all kinds of terms. And so one of the things that I remember was an influence was a popular movie back in the day. Well, one Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which psychologists hate that movie now, but it's it was the depiction. I grew up in LA, so of course Hollywood was right there. So that was the depiction of what that was about, and so most of us didn't want to even talk about it, much less think about it. So carrying that into raising kids and kind of working and developing and being a family, other life stressors started to show up, like just living, just basic stresses of living and functioning. And so when I got to the point where things started to get challenging for me, I didn't know what to do. And like David said, a lot of those things just perpetuated into other things. And so it wasn't until 2005, I guess, somewhere in that area, where I hit a brick wall and I needed help. and I asked for it. And when I got to the VA, because I was a veteran, I started learning information that I didn't even know existed. Like post-traumatic stress disorder, I knew what the term meant, but I didn't know what the symptoms were. So when I started to kind of, and be informed about what the symptoms were, I looked back and I said, man, I've been struggling with this for a long time. I went almost 15 years out of the military before I got to a point where I was like, wait a minute, I hadn't been able to sleep in years. I've been having these issues for a long time. And that's what kind of started me on this path that I'm on now. And I just wanted to be more informed. And so I chased everything I possibly could about PTSD. I went to all the treatments. I went through all of the therapies. I saw doctors and I discussed it. And it was like the world opened up. It was like, man, this is all something that is available, and it's always been available, and it continues to be something that I could use, to feel better. And so that's kind of where my life started with the VA as well, because I was a patient, I was a consumer for many years with the VA, and then shortly after I started getting into the community. I actually worked for a nonprofit in Phoenix, Arizona that worked with SMI. Back then, in Arizona, they're called Title 19, and I know here they have a different, different names and terminology, but they were mostly just the SMI population. And so when I worked for that population, that's when I really started to notice about NAMI and how deep they went, as far as really making awareness to mental illness and providing people with information that is what we didn't have to do. Some of the struggles that we made over the years, we didn't have to make because there was information about what we did. And a lot of it, for me, was cultural. We just didn't talk about it. And so I kind of got on this whole movement of informing myself and informing others. And so as it turns out, the VA had a position for veterans that wanted to give back to other veterans and help other veterans navigate the system and become more informed about what's going on and talking about those issues. So that was about 7 years ago, and I've been working for the VA since in that capacity, to where most of what I do is inform veterans of different resources, and I share my story about living in the community, because a lot of veterans here in the Northern California area, we have a little over 200,000 veterans that are actually receiving care at our facilities. At 9 facilities, I think, in Northern California at this particular VA. And there's a lot of veterans out there in the community, living in the community, and I make sure that I involve myself with things like panels and NAMI and some of the other resources out there. And I do need some cards for some Calvet people too, so don't get out of here without giving me some resources. And so mostly just to inform veterans and inform the public that we all have issues that may not be something we deal with or have dealt with in the past, but we can deal with them in the future. And so, part of my advocation today is mostly just to show people. I share with veterans all the time. It's like, look, if you think that a diagnosis is the end of your life, so to speak, not physically but metaphorically, then look at me. My life started when I actually realized that I had PTSD. I was diagnosed with it, and I have to learn to live with it. And my life started then, because now I'm a better person. I live, coping with. I have coping strategies now that I might have been able to use in the 6th grade. When I got thrown out of school for fighting. Those kinds of things. And so now I have coping strategies to deal with the world and deal with things despite, being diagnosed with a mental illness. And so it's actually been more of a blessing to me than it was anything else, because I would have never gotten where I'm at now had I not walked in and asked for help. And so, I just appreciate having resources available to be able to get help and stay focused on doing things. And so, I'm more of an advocate these days. I was trained by a state advocate in Arizona, and I just remember listening to him thinking to myself, man, I wish I could do that, and here I am, 7, 8 years later, I'm doing exactly what he was doing and maybe a few more things. So I just appreciate having that availability. And I like to inform people as much as possible. It's like, especially some of my veterans that have issues that say, um, that nobody cares. Nobody cares. There's nothing out there for me, and I just smile at them and I give them about 5 minutes of my story, and they're like, "Wow." I was like, "Yeah, there you go." I was one of those guys. So it's out there. We just gotta support each other and making sure we get that information to them. And it's not just for veterans; it's for family members because now we've really started to engage family members a lot more than we used to. It's just part of the new, change in directions about mental illness. We need to focus on the entire family and not just the veterans. So, because the family suffers just as much as the veterans do. So, um, what was our time again? Okay, so with that, like I said, I'm affiliated. I've been a member of NAMI since 2010, I guess it was, and I've always NAMI has an agreement with the VA, and we do a lot of different services together, and I'll be around. So, like I said, especially you Calvet guys, I've really been trying to get in here. Y'all just don't understand. so, um, so anyway. That's it for me. Thank you.
So, well, a couple of things I'd like to touch on. One is because it's a brain disorder and the brain is the most complex issue of the body, organ for the body, the disorders that impact it are also complex. They're not easy. The media likes to wrap everything up in a nice little bow and put it up in a box on a shelf, and that doesn't work. So a person gets a diagnosis is not going to be the same as this person with schizophrenia is not the same as this person with schizophrenia or this person with schizophrenia. Same thing with depression, PTSD, all the rest of them. There's different intensities. Some people can get by with maybe behavioral therapy and yoga and things like that, alternative therapies. Some people may need a little bit of that and a little bit of medication. Some people are going to need lots of medication. They're seriously mentally ill. And so that makes it harder for diagnosticians to diagnose. It makes it harder, especially when people start self-medicating. You hear a lot about that. And so they're trying to give a medication to somebody. They may not know that that person's using something on the side, and that makes it harder for them to make that diagnosis. And then sometimes the individual can't wait. It could take several weeks for a medication to start taking effect. Well, unfortunately, methamphetamine works right now. And so that's a little bit part of the struggle, why some people will start self-medicating because it takes care of their problems right now. And so addiction is a big component for a lot of people who were trying to deal with that. And so, like I said, nobody really chooses to live with mental illness. And so it's just that, and it's not something people can focus their way out of. You can't tell someone that you need to focus more, you need to think harder. You can't tell people to pray on it, and because that ends up being a cop out too. Now people can use prayer in accordance with their therapy, but it does not take the place of therapy and help. And what Alton had also touched about with families can't expect their loved one to do it all by themselves. Living with a mental illness is difficult, and you need help and you need support. And so the first thing for any caregiver, friend, family member is you need to inform yourself. You can go on the internet and find lots of information out there. NAMI, you go to their website and type in NAMI and schizophrenia or anything else, and you'll find a bunch of articles about different medical conditions that you can look at and research. Come to one of our family support groups and hear from other family members who've been in the same place. There are some people in our sphere, in the mental health sphere, where they've had a problem with their family members because their family members are in denial. And it's a challenge because you as a parent, say you've got your kid has been healthy for 16, 18, 20 odd years, and then the switch flips. And now the mental health diagnosis takes over. And so they're in denial because I've had this perfect child, and now this child's acting out. Well, it's something that the child's doing. It's the child's fault, and then you start having a separation, a divide gets created within the family unit. And sometimes you end up having other family members get sucked into that, and it becomes a whole huge issue within the mental illness. You got the mental illness, and then you have a family divide at the same time, and it can be very stressful on families. There's divorces, siblings break apart, and so one of the things we were pushing for is we want family members to be informed, we want them to be supported, so that way they can do a better job of supporting and loving their family member and helping that person live a healthy life, and help that way keep the family unit together, be less likely for any divisions to break up, because if there's ever any hole in the mental health system, which there are many holes in our healthcare system, is family members are going to be the ones there that can capture that and to help fill that gap. And besides it just being, it's better for family members to stay together and love one another and support one another in general. But when you have a health issue along with that, it's a needed thing. And so family members can't push that off on their loved ones. It's not all their responsibility to fix that, to address that. Family members need to look at themselves and to address their behaviors and how they interact with their loved one as well. So that's one of the things we really promote with our family-to-family class and our family support groups, that we want family members to be engaged in this. There's a little bit of a challenge sometimes in dealing with mental health professionals because of HIPAA. They don't want to give away any private information. That doesn't mean that they can't receive your information, because as a family member, you may be seeing things that when I go see my doctor, I may not tell him or her everything. But the family member can come along and say, well, actually, he's also doing this, or he doesn't do that. He's not really taking his medication. And so the family members can have a better chance of observing what's going on, because usually psychiatrists don't get a lot of time with the patient. So it's a way of getting more complete picture for that doctor, so the doctor can do a better job of treating the individual. So that's why we like to have family members engaged. Family members can also help advocate for laws. We need to have laws changed to help fix some of these holes that are in our mental health care system. Right now, there's so many holes that mostly individuals who are having struggles with their mental health end up falling through all the safety nets that are out there, or what few safety nets are out there, and it ends up being for law enforcement to fix. And that's not what law enforcement, that's not why they became police officers. They're not case managers, they're not social workers. We at NAMI Sacramento, we're working with the local law enforcement, especially with Sacramento Police Department. Last year they put all their officers through a 40-hour crisis intervention team training. That's the nationally recognized best practice. I'm very happy about that. Out of the 40 hours, we had 3 hours of that. We had a family panel, a peer panel, which is individuals living with mental illness, and we had a survivors of suicide panel. And that's where people who tried to take their life as a result of their mental illness but didn't, and law enforcement was there to help them pick up their pieces. And so all sharing their experiences, either positive or negative, that they've had with law enforcement, with the idea of informing the officers so that way they could have better interactions out there to learn from that direct experience. So that was been a very positive experience for us as well. We're trying to help them out. There's other areas in the judicial system where we still need to work on, parole and probation being a couple of the major ones right now. Those are some of the areas that we're advocating for and working on change for. At this point in time, we'd like to turn it over to you guys if you guys have any